Popular culture is awash with the idea that we only have a decade left until we trigger a climate catastrophe. Climate activist Greta Thunberg has said we are less than 12 years away from not being able to undo our mistakes. Many world leaders have echoed her fearful words, but are these words true? Before we go any further, let me say that I am a devout environmentalist. I just love trees. I was recycling and operating an organic garden as a young teenager. My wife and I have been running a worm farm recycling our kitchen scraps for over 30 years. Well, if the truth be known, my wife has been doing all the hard work. I just like to take the credit. To cut to the quick, I just love the magnificent environment that God has created. We need to take care of it. My co-researcher is Kurt Malberg, and he also is a passionate environmentalist. He and his wife are minimalists and avid recyclers with a long history of care for the planet. So are we facing a climate catastrophe? According to climate change orthodoxy, humans have been the main drivers of climate change since the 1800s by burning fossil fuels like coal, oil and gas. We're told that our greenhouse gas emissions are creating a blanket around the Earth, trapping the sun's heat and raising global temperatures to dangerously high levels. It's true that since the Industrial Revolution, the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide, CO2, has risen by over 50%, but it's a huge leap to believe a global catastrophe is just around the corner. Sadly, many people do believe this. Teenagers now suffer from climate anxiety. Young adults are choosing not to have children. Fear is all around us. Let's clear one thing up first. No side of this debate has a monopoly on care for the environment. Most people, whatever their thoughts on climate change, want humans to flourish and the environment to be protected. We all want future generations to inherit a healthy planet. Christians have a special interest in caring for the earth. We believe that nature has intrinsic value because God made it and owns it. God put the first couple in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. Then he extended this mandate to all people and to all creation, making humans the caretakers of the planet. But Christians are mistaken if they think the only way to be good caretakers of the earth is to embrace climate alarmism. Consider 10 reasons to question climate alarmism. First reason, the uncertainties of climate alarmism are enormous. If humans suddenly stopped emitting CO2, there is no certainty that CO2 levels would stop rising. Why? Humans only contribute a fraction, approximately 5% of all CO2 to Earth's atmosphere. The rest comes from volcanoes, oceans, plants, animals and decaying plant matter. Even then, CO2 itself is responsible for only 10% of the overall greenhouse effect. Also, keep in mind that if greenhouse gas levels stop rising, we don't know that global temperatures will stop rising. Earth's temperature has risen and fallen many times in the past. It was warmer during Jesus' lifetime, cooler when the Anglo-Saxons overran Britain, warmer again in late medieval times, and cooler again just before the modern era. Centuries ago, vineyards were common across northern England. Greenland was much greener, and farmers even spread into northern Russia. In other words, the climate has always changed without help or hindrance from humans. Second reason, CO2 is the life source of the planet. CO2 or carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. It is a beneficial, naturally occurring, colourless, odourless, non-toxic trace gas. CO2 is fundamental for all life on Earth. It is what every living creature exhales. It is essential for plant life and photosynthesis, and it forms the basis of the planetary food chain. To call CO2 a pollutant is a betrayal of science, language and reason. Pollution kills, but CO2 causes life on Earth to thrive. If CO2 levels in the Earth's atmosphere were to drop by just a little, all plants would die, causing oxygen levels to plummet and all animal life to go extinct. Now that would be catastrophic climate change. Third reason, the Earth is greening. As CO2 levels have risen, the Earth has been getting greener. Over the last 35 years, quarter to half of Earth's vegetated lands have shown significant greening, according to a study published in Nature. That growth is equivalent to 2 times the continental United States. A warmer, greener planet is a more fertile and inhabitable planet. History bears this out. In the past, coolings have led to famine, social disruption and depopulation. But a warmer planet has meant more prosperous times for humans, increased longevity, higher crop yields, population growth and wealth accumulation. Fourth reason, too many failed predictions. Climate scientists have been making doomsday predictions for over a century. In the early 1980s, a NASA scientist predicted over the next century much of Antarctica would melt and that sea levels would rise by 6 metres. It has only risen 8 centimetres since then. Around the same time, a Berkeley professor predicted that 1 billion people would die from climate change famines. Instead, world food production keeps rising. In 2001, a climate scientist from the University of East Anglia predicted that winter snowfall would become a very rare and exciting event, and children just aren't going to know what snow is. Actually, snow cover in the Northern Hemisphere has been growing. Tim Flannery famously predicted that Australia's east coast would run out of water, saying even the rain that falls isn't actually going to fill our dams and our river systems. But Australia got record-breaking rain last year, flooding our rivers and reservoirs. Hurricanes were supposed to worsen. The polar bear population was supposed to plummet. The Great Barrier Reef was supposed to die off. But in every case, the reverse has happened. Over 100 climate models have been used to predict future temperatures. Almost all of them seriously over-predicted global temperatures. If so many climate predictions have been wrong in the past, how can we trust the doomsday predictions we hear today? Fifth reason, climate alarmism is driven by a false consensus. People claim there is a consensus on climate change, but in fact it is a false consensus only made possible by silencing those who disagree with them. Scientists who disagree with climate orthodoxy are labelled climate deniers. They are automatically seen as non-experts. Their achievements are null and void. Their views are silenced in scientific journals and social media and in the press. Government and corporations won't hire them. One of them is Patrick Moore, who co-founded Greenpeace but later quit the organisation. He says that climate alarmism is groupthink and mindless adherence to a narrative. Another one is Nigel Kildare, a former editor of New Scientist. He said the whole global warming business has become like a religion, and people who disagree are called heretics. I'm a heretic. Climate science isn't settled, but has been captured by a ruling paradigm that allows no debate and is doing damage to real science. Sixth reason, the political agenda is driven by the money. Climate alarmism has created a $1.5 trillion global industry funded by you, the taxpayer. This global warming industry is larger than Big Pharma or the military-industrial complex. It is 10 times the money that was spent sending man into space and the moon. At the forefront of the climate-industrial complex are groups like the World Economic Forum and the IPCC. These globalist bodies pretend to be neutral and purely interested in science. In fact, they are political organisations run by political apparatchiks and pushing a political agenda. Under their influence, politicians across the world ignore all nuance and repeat simple slogans that win elections but stretch the truth. Climate science has been corrupted by politics. Funding is the lifeblood of science, and politicians and bureaucrats hold the purse strings. For scientists to get a grant approved, advance their career or get published, they must echo the politically correct view on climate change. Seventh reason, fraud and manipulation are endemic. Some of the key data that is being used to shape public policy today was fraudulently produced. The hockey stick graph is an icon for climate alarmists, but it was made by a team that cherry-picked and fudged the data, erasing the medieval warm period and the Little Ice Age from the temperature record. Dr. Michael Mann, who led the team, lost a court case over it and refused to pay his court-ordered costs. You may remember the scandal known as ClimateGate, when emails were leaked showing that scientists had tampered with the ring data of trees to fit their assumption about climate change. Australia's own Bureau of Meteorology has been ratted out for deleting high temperatures from past records. In one instance, the BOM erased Australia's hottest day, 125 Fahrenheit, 51.7 degrees centigrade at Bourke on the 3rd of January 1909. Their fraud was uncovered by MP Craig Kelly, who searched the handwritten archives. Examples of fraud and manipulation could be multiplied. Check out a research for more. Eighth reason, the harms of hysteria. Activists like Greta Thunberg have called for an end to all greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. This would spell disaster for the poorest of the poor. African economist James Shikawati warns that climate alarmists are keen to kill the African dream. He says, "We are being told, don't touch your resources, don't touch your oil, don't touch your coal. That is suicide." He is right. There is no way that Africa can industrialise with so-called renewable energy. You can't build a steel industry and railway networks with wind and solar. It is more accurate to call wind and solar unreliable, since they only produce power for 10 to 30% of the time for most of the year. They will never be able to generate the energy we need. So how have billions of people been lifted out of poverty? Free markets that have access to cheap, reliable electricity. As Dr. Bjorn Lomborg says, the cleanest places are not the poorest countries, but the richer economies that have cleaned up their act. As societies have become richer, individuals can afford to stop worrying about food and sanitation and to start worrying about the environment. Ninth reason, the hypocrisy is beyond belief. The big giveaway that climate alarmism is a con is the hypocrisy of its leaders. The World Economic Forum says it wants to limit global temperature rise and stave off disaster. But at their Davos summit last year, delegates arrived at over 1,000 private jets and belched out the same amount of CO2 as 350,000 petrol cars would over the same week-long period. Climate hypocrites are everywhere. White House climate czar John Kerry emitted over 300 metric tonnes of CO2 through private jet travel in just 18 months. He even flew by private jet to Iceland to receive an award for his work on climate change. Bill Gates just finished his latest book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, where he tells us we can only avoid a climate catastrophe by reaching zero emissions in 30 years. But Bill Gates owns 4 private jets, and he calls his jet collection his guilty pleasure. Al Gore exaggerates about climate change all the time, but he owns a mansion in Tennessee that uses over 30 times the energy of the average American home. Steven Spielberg, Prince Harry and Taylor Swift all lecture the public about climate change while crisscrossing the world in their private jets. Climate activists tell us that coastlines will soon disappear under the ocean, but they keep buying waterfront mansions. None of these people deserve to be taken seriously until they practice what they preach. 10th reason, climate alarmism is a religion with a rival world view. Climate alarmism isn't just a concern for the environment, it's an entire world view. Greta Thunberg has written, "The climate crisis is not just about the environment, it is a crisis of human rights, of justice and of political will. Colonial, racist and patriarchal systems of oppression have created and fueled it. We need to dismantle them all." This worldview is called neo-Marxism or cultural Marxism, and it is deeply hostile to Christian faith. Climate alarmism is a secular religion, preaching doom if certain radical changes aren't made, with a strict moral code that offers a path to salvation. It denies central tenets of the Christian faith. According to climate alarmists, humans are just a cog in the machine of nature. Instead of creatures uniquely made in the image of God with authority and care over other created things, some even call us a plague on the earth and call for depopulation. Most of all, climate hysteria denies that God is sovereign over his creation. But in his word, God has promised in Genesis that while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer, winter, day and night shall not cease. We have a responsibility to care for the environment, stop pollution, and preserve our planet for future generations. Like Scripture says in Psalm 37 verse 3, "Trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture." Climate alarmism is a house of cards that will eventually fall, but the Word of God stands forever.